Welcome to Reddit Family Secrets, where trust shatters in an instant and the truth costs more than you ever imagined. If you crave stories that grip you from the first word and don't let go, hit subscribe and stay until the end, because what's coming will change everything you thought you knew. Now let's begin. My name is Daniel Mercer, and this is the story of the two worst nights of my life, and the one afternoon that made them both worth it. I met Claudia Torres at a rooftop party in Austin, Texas, the summer I turned 27. She was standing near the edge of the terrace, looking out at the city lights like she owned every single one of them. She had that energy, magnetic, self-possessed, the kind of confidence that makes you want to earn her attention. And I did. I worked for it. For 5 years, I worked for it every single day. Looking back now, I realized that was always the problem. With Claudia, love was never a given. It was a performance review. We built a life together in the way young professionals in a booming city do. A shared apartment in the South Congress neighborhood, joint dinner reservations, overlapping friend groups, and a rhythm that felt, on the surface, like partnership. I was an urban planner at a mid-sized firm downtown. She was climbing the corporate ladder at a marketing agency that had recently landed 2 Fortune 500 clients. She was brilliant and driven, and I love that about her. I genuinely did. But there's a difference between a woman who is ambitious and a woman who uses ambition as a wall. The first time I proposed to Claudia, I had spent 4 months planning it. Not because I was nervous, I was certain. We'd been together 3 years, and every conversation we'd ever had about the future had included the word us. I had a ring custom-made at a jeweler on South First Street. A vintage-cut sapphire surrounded by small diamonds, because she'd once mentioned in passing that sapphires were underrated and she was tired of everyone defaulting to diamonds. I'd remembered that offhand comment for a year and a half. I took her to Uchi, the Japanese restaurant where we'd had our first real date, the one where we'd talked until they turned the lights up and the staff started stacking chairs around us. I had arranged for a small corner table, low lighting, no grand public gesture, because I knew her well enough to know she'd hate the attention. When the moment came, I reached into my jacket, pulled out the box, and got down on one knee. She didn't look at the ring. She looked at her phone, just for a second, the reflex of a generation, and then she looked at me with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. Not joy, not surprise, something closer to discomfort. She said she needed me to understand something, that the agency had just entered the most critical growth phase in its history. That she was up for a director position that would define the next decade of her career. That being engaged right now would change how her colleagues and clients perceived her. It would make her seem less available, less focused, less serious. She said she loved me. She said the timing was just wrong. I sat back down at the table and nodded. I put the box back in my pocket. I told her I understood. I didn't understand, but I wanted to. I told myself that love means meeting someone where they are. I told myself that patience was a form of devotion. We drove home in near silence, and I placed the ring box in the back of my sock drawer, behind a pair of wool socks I only wore in January. And I waited. 2 years later, Claudia got the director position. There was a party at the agency. Champagne, speeches, a slideshow of her achievements. I stood in the back of the room and watched her accept congratulations with that same confident radiance that had drawn me in years before, and I thought, now the timing is right. She has everything she wanted professionally. Now there's room for us. I didn't plan anything elaborate the second time. No restaurant, no ring box presentation. Just the two of us on a quiet Sunday evening in our living room. The Austin skyline going amber through the floor-to-ceiling windows. I sat beside her on the couch while she read through some work emails, and I gently closed her laptop, and I said her name. She looked at me. I told her I loved her. I told her I wanted to build the rest of my life with her. I said, "Claudia, will you?" She sighed, not a sigh of anticipation, a sigh of exhaustion. She said, "Daniel, not now." Not even a full sentence. 3 words. Like I'd asked her to take out the trash. She told me she wasn't ready for the weight of marriage, that we were already committed to each other in the ways that mattered, that the piece of paper was a formality she wasn't sure she needed. She said she didn't want to lose what we had by rushing into something that would change the dynamic. And that was when something shifted in me. Not loudly, quietly, like a door gently swinging shut on its own. I thought about the rent I covered when her commissions were slow. I thought about the dinners I cooked when she worked late, left warm on the stove with a note. I thought about the family functions I attended alone because she was always busy, and the way I defended her to my mother, who had started asking questions with her eyes even when she said nothing with her mouth. I thought about the rings still sitting in my sock drawer, next to the January socks. I was her safety net. I was the floor she stood on while she reached for everything else. And I had been so determined to be patient, so terrified of being the man who couldn't handle a strong woman's ambition, that I had confused being supportive with being used. I waited until morning. And then, very calmly, over coffee, I told her we were done. She laughed, an incredulous, almost insulted laugh. She said I was being dramatic. She said I was punishing her for having a career. I said nothing. I walked to the bedroom and started pulling clothes from the closet. The laughter stopped. She followed me in, and her voice changed, sharp now, disbelieving. She told me I was throwing away 5 years over a concept, over a tradition, over my ego. She said marriage was just a label and that real love didn't need validation. I kept folding shirts. I told her I wasn't leaving over the rejection. I was leaving because I had finally understood what the rejections meant. They meant she had already decided how our story ended, with her options open and my loyalty on standby, and she had just never bothered to tell me. I was out of the apartment by 3 o'clock that afternoon. I blocked her on everything before I reached the parking garage. I threw myself into work the way heartbroken people do, obsessively, gratefully. There's something clarifying about loss. It strips away the noise. And in that quiet, I started noticing things I'd been too distracted to see before. Like the fact that my colleague Rachel and Gwen had been stopping by my desk for reasons that had nothing to do with project logistics. Rachel was the lead architect on a mixed-use development project I'd been overseeing near the Rainy Street corridor. She was sharp, funny, and completely unbothered by the performance of being impressive because she simply was impressive without needing anyone to validate it. We started having lunch together, then coffee, then long conversations in the parking garage after hours because neither of us wanted the day to end. She never played games. She never made me wonder. She told me exactly what she thought and exactly what she felt, and the directness of it, after 5 years of reading between lines, was like cold water on a hot day. Necessary, clarifying, a little overwhelming in the best possible way. 3 months after leaving Claudia, I had to return to the office building we'd shared through the last year of our lease, a co-working space in the 2nd Street district that we'd split costs on when she was freelancing. There were legal documents to sign to formally dissolve the financial agreement and release both our names from the remaining contract. My attorney had reviewed everything. It would take 15 minutes. Rachel offered to come with me. I said yes without hesitating. The lobby of the building smelled exactly the way I remembered: cold air and polished concrete, and the faint trace of the cold brew coffee bar near the entrance. I felt Rachel's hand find mine as we walked toward the elevator, her grip easy and steady, the kind of contact that doesn't announce itself. The elevator opened on the 8th floor. Claudia was standing at the reception desk. She looked up at the sound of the doors and put on the automatic smile she wore for everyone, and then the smile dissolved in real time as her eyes landed on me, and then on Rachel, and then on our hands. I watched her face go through 5 different calculations in about 3 seconds. Then she stepped forward. Her voice went soft and measured the way it always did when she was trying to reclaim control of a situation. She said she'd been meaning to reach out, that she'd done a lot of thinking, that she recognized she hadn't been fair to me, and that she was in a different place now, more grounded, more ready. She actually suggested we get dinner, to talk about where things stood. She said this while Rachel was standing right next to me. I looked at her and felt the strangest thing. Nothing. Not anger, not longing, not even satisfaction. Just a calm, settled emptiness, the way you feel after a fever finally breaks. I introduced Rachel as my partner. And then, because the moment called for it, I mentioned that the city park's redevelopment contract, the flagship project Claudia's firm had been pitching for the better part of 6 months, had just been awarded to our team, with Rachel as lead designer. The color left her face in a slow, thorough way. She had lost both things to the same person, standing in the same lobby, in the span of 30 seconds. I told her I was just here for the paperwork and that my attorney had already reviewed the documents. We walked past her toward the conference room. The room was small and neutral and smelled like dry erase markers. I sat across from the notary while Claudia took a seat at the far end of the table, her posture rigid and her hands folded too carefully on the surface in front of her. She tried one more time. She talked about her history, about the apartment and the shared routines, and the version of us she claimed she'd been protecting by slowing things down. She said the second rejection had been a test of my commitment, and that my leaving had broken her heart. I let her finish. Then I told her that a relationship isn't a test, that a person who uses love as a measuring instrument doesn't have a partner. They have a subject. I told her I understood now that the rejections weren't about timing or career milestones. They were about control. And the moment I stopped being controllable, everything she claimed to feel had suddenly become urgent. Rachel didn't say anything. She just placed her hand over mine on the table. That was enough. Claudia looked at our hands the way you look at something you've just realized you can't have. I signed the documents with a steady hand and slid the folder across the table. I told her that once she added her signature, we'd have no reason to speak again. She held the pen for a long moment. Then she signed. The folder closed with a sound that should have been louder, given what it meant. We stood, gathered our things, and walked out. The office staff had the diplomatic busyness of people who had witnessed something they would definitely be discussing at lunch. We moved through it without stopping. The afternoon sun hit us the moment the building doors opened, that specific Texas afternoon warmth that feels like permission. I breathed in, and for the first time in longer than I could calculate, my chest felt like mine again. 4 months later, Rachel and I drove out to Lake Travis on a Saturday with no particular plan. We sat on a flat rock above the water as the sun dropped behind the hills to the west, and I thought about the fact that I was not nervous. I was not rehearsing. I was not bracing for a verdict. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the ring, not the sapphire I'd had made for Claudia. I'd returned that months ago. This one I'd chosen with Rachel in mind. A simple platinum band with a single oval diamond, clean and unadorned, because Rachel always said she trusted things that didn't try too hard. I asked her to marry me. She said yes before I finished the sentence. Not after a pause. Not with conditions or caveats or a sigh and a redirect. Just yes, immediate and sure, like she'd already known the answer long before the question arrived. I think about that sometimes, the distance between those two moments. The man kneeling in a candlelit restaurant, watching his girlfriend check her phone, and the man sitting on a rock above a lake in the Texas Hill Country, watching the woman who would become his wife say yes before he could even finish asking. The rejections used to feel like failures. Now I understand they were course corrections. Every, not now, pushed me further down a road that eventually led somewhere real. I am not anyone's backup plan. I am not a safety net or a contingency or a kept option. I am a partner in the truest and most straightforward sense of the word, in a life built on honesty, on reciprocity, on the radical simplicity of two people who actually want the same thing at the same time. Rachel and I are getting married in the spring. We've already picked a venue overlooking the water. She helped choose it. On the first day we visited. No hesitation at all. Welcome back to Reddit Family Secrets. If this story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button. You're among the nearly 80% of viewers who haven't yet, and we'd love to have you stay.